Welcome. This is a repeat of the ADUG Canberra June 2020 presentation on Maslow's hammer and a spar. Due to the original presentation not being recorded due to a PBCK error, this is a repeat. We've probably all heard of Maslow's hammer. Apparently Maslow said this in 1966, but its origins go back at least a century prior to that. In terms of developers, this is very relevant. If we only have a limited number of tools or programming languages and techniques that we rely on, then sometimes we may be applying the wrong technique or tool to solve a problem. The purpose of this presentation is to demonstrate one of the newer JavaScript frameworks for developing single page applications. The objective of the presentation is to develop a single page application, also known as a spar, and we're going to obtain data from a REST server and we're going to display it on the screen. We are going to obtain our data from the United States Geological Survey. They provide various feeds, and one of the feeds that they have is of earthquake events, or as they call them, features. And if we go down onto this web page, you can see this GeoJSON summary feed. We click on here and this will show us the format of the data that we're going to receive from our REST request. There are a number of different feeds that you can get. We're going to be looking at the earthquakes with a magnitude of 2.5 or more from the previous 24 hours. The data will be returned to us as a JSON object and of this format. So the main thing is it starts with some metadata. The main thing we're going to be interested in is the title and also an array of features or earthquake events. We're going to grab some information out of here, including the magnitude, a time, and other details. We're going to be using Vue.Js. Vue.js is a modern JavaScript framework for developing applications in the browser. The three top frameworks are currently Angular and React and Vue. Angular is very popular overseas. React seems to be more popular in Australia, and Vue is catching up to the two of them. In order to develop a Vue application, you will need the following things installed on your system. Now, all of these tools are cross-platform, so they're available for Windows, they're available for Linux, and of course they're available on Macintosh. Node.js can be installed directly from the Node.js website. I should make a point of saying that all of the URLs referenced in this presentation and the code will be on a GitHub repository, and the details of that I'll show at the end, and so there's no need to write them all down. With Node.js, you will also get installed the npm package manager, and we will be using that to install some of the other libraries that we will require. The Vue.js site is here, and it's got a whole bunch of information and help. If we go through the getting started, it has some information, some installation details, and yeah, plenty of documentation and plenty of resources to help. We're also going to be using the Vue CLI to scaffold our application. We will be using the Beautify Library to give our application a Google material design look, As you can see, there's a whole bunch of things that this library will give you, like little buttons and that meet the material design criteria. There's a whole bunch of other components, cards and lists and pop-outs, and it's fairly widely used, as you can see. If we go to the Get Started, this will give us some more information and details on some of the various components that they have, breadcrumbs and dialogues. So you can have these with a few minimal code. So for example, let's say we want to put a scrollable dialogue. You can see that's on there, and if we have a look at the source, we can see what the source for that example is, and you can just copy that and include it into your project. We are also going to be using the Axios HTTP client library. This will enable us to do our calls to the REST server to obtain our data. There are a number of different IDEs that you can use when you're developing web apps. I like to use Visual Studio Code. It's free, it's available for Mac, Windows and Linux, so fully cross-platform. There's the ability to add plugins to it to assist working with any of your languages and add extra features. As you can see here, it's this example shows a Python plugin, a C++ plugins, linters, debugging with the Chrome browser. This is the one that we'll be using, is Vue, and it's available from Microsoft, but it's very good. Once we have everything installed, we can open up the Visual Studio Code, and we're going to navigate to the folder above where we want the new project to live. So we will File, Open, and we're in our projects. So let's go to our Vue directory in my instance, and then in the terminal window we're going to create a skeleton application, and we do this using the Vue CLI, and we're going to run the following: Vue create Vue ADUG. So this will prompt us to put in some options. So let's move this up here, and we're going to quickly run through the manual options. We are going to take the defaults. So Babel transpiles ES6 into JavaScript ES5 to make it compatible with earlier browsers. Some of the earlier browsers, such as previous versions of Internet Explorer, will not support the features that are required, but those browsers are getting pretty old now. TypeScript is an option. You can use TypeScript with your Vue projects. TypeScript is a strongly typed version of JavaScript, and in fact it is transpiled from TypeScript into JavaScript as part of the compilation process. Progressive web apps are applications you can put on your mobile devices. We're not going to go into that today either. The next two options, Router and Vuex, are both libraries that you would probably use in a regular production project. The router can be used to control transitions between pages, and the Vuex is a store where you can store the state of projects and put in variables, and these can be used between the components of your project. We can use CSS preprocessors, and out of the box, so this can be Sass or less, and I believe also stylus. We're not going to do that for this particular presentation. Again, it's probably on a larger project you're going to be using this feature. The linter and formatter will be used to make sure that we don't have any silly errors in our code, and by pressing the appropriate Control D key will format our code. We can have unit testing and end-to-end testing all scaffolded up for us if we like. Again, for this simple project we're not going to be using these. Because I selected the linting, it gives us some options here. I'll just take the default, and again, and then we're going to keep any special configuration files, details in separate files. No, we're not going to save this for future projects. So what it's doing now is it's setting up the project, and it's going to work out which packages it needs to download from the internet. Hopefully most of these will be in my cache, and so it shouldn't take too long. The first time you run this it may take a bit longer, but that'll depend on your internet speed, of course. Okay, done in 35 seconds, not too bad. It's now going to install the packages for that project. All done. So you can see here now that it has created our new directory and put some things inside of it. So let's navigate into that directory now. So we're going to open, and I'm going to go back into Vue, and we're going to go into our Vue ADUG directory, and we're going to use this. Now we're going to open the terminal, and we're going to add the Beautify option. So this is where we go View, Add Beautify. So this will add the Beautify library, and you will get the appropriate packages that are required. And off it goes. We are now in a position, we're going to take the default. Okay, so now we're going to run the application. So we're doing this using the npm. So the first time when you run the npm like this, it will compile the application. You can see there's quite a few modules that it's brought in. These have been brought in and will be sitting under this node modules, and as you can see there's quite a lot of libraries that have been brought in. Don't stress, when this gets built for production it will only gather the things it needs, and it's quite efficient in terms of size of the application it builds. We can open the application to have a look at it by pressing this, and you can see that we have a page which has been built for us. It's got a nav bar at the top, and yes, a little button, as you can see, highlight, so we can press that and things will happen. Let's have a look now at the code, see what's been generated for us. There's a few folders and a few files have been generated. The ones that are important for us to look at are the config file, which shows that Beautify has been added in. There is a yarn lock file. This is used by the package manager to make sure all the dependencies between the required library modules have been fulfilled. There's a generated README file. Let me just move this down. In fact, we can close that, which is a basic markdown file that you can use. And the pretty cool thing about this is the phone's ringing. Modern technology wonders. The phone's not ringing anymore. As I was saying, the cool thing about it is that you've got a side-by-side view of the document, and you can show how the markdown would be rendered. So for example, we could say hello, and you can see on the right it's automatically making the rendering changes as we key in. So that's pretty cool. Let's just close that one down, and let's see what else we have. The package JSON. This is a pretty important file. This has a lot of the information that's required to build and serve your project. So you can see at the top again there's some sort of meta information about your project. The scripts is what the npm program is running. When we say npm serve, it runs this Vue CLI service command, and we can run the build or lint as well. The dependencies, these are the library dependencies for when the program is deployed, and the dev dependencies are those that are used during development. So as you can see, there's quite a few of those, and they aren't part of the final delivered project. Babel config, I don't usually need to go into that. Git ignore, that's pretty standard. I should point out that as part of the scaffolding of the project, they have created the Git repository and done an initial commit. Again, there's some configuration for the linter. We don't really need that. And there's the browsers list, which I've got no idea what that's for, but it ain't broke, don't fix it. Next we have the two folders above. Well, the third one is the node modules. I've already mentioned that. Basically, this is where all the external library stuff is placed, and we can, for all intents and purposes, ignore this. Under the public directory, these are the items that will be served as if from a root directory from the web page. Basically, there's the icon, the fav icon, and then there's the index HTML. Of note in here is that within the body there is a div, and it has an ID of app. When the application is generated by Vue, it will be loaded underneath this attribute within the document model. We'll have a look at that in a second. In the source directory, there's a couple of further directories. We've got assets, components, plugins. There could be some other directories, as depending on the libraries that you're using. For example, the Vuex will bring in you usually have that under a store, but this is the basic startup. We have a main JavaScript program or file, and this imports the things it needs to get started, which is the Vue code itself, app, which is this Vue source file here, and the Beautify from the plugins. It will create the new Vue context, it will render it, and it will mount it under the div that we saw previously with the ID of app. Let's have a look under the app view. A Vue application has two or three parts, main parts. You have the template, which is the HTML that will be rendered. There is a script section, and followed optionally at the end there could also be a style section. So if you note, the script is basically a Java object, and we'll be adding some things to this a little bit later in the demonstration. The template, you might see these tags, which are a bit unusual, VApp, these V- tags. These are all from the Beautify library. I won't necessarily go into all the details of these, but you can see we've got two images which correspond to the two images on the navbar, and on the right there's the button, there's a space in between, so you can see there's the spacer. We could have something in the middle if we wanted to, and then here's the V button, which is basically a wrap around the standard HTML button, but it also has all the styling and built in. If we get further down, we've got the content. So within the V app we have the app bar, and then we've got the content, and the content is going to be this component, which is called Hello World. So we can see under the components, this is a Hello World component. So what will happen is it'll import Hello World from components Hello World, and it's saying here that, hey, I'm going to use this as an HTML tag. All right, let's just have a look at the Hello World component. Again, this has a template, a script, and in this instance there's no style. Now, one of the things that is really good about the environment that we have is that as we make changes to the code and save the source members, the NPM will automatically recompile those pieces of the code that are required to be changed and push them out to the browser, where it'll be reloaded automatically. So if I bring back up the terminal at the bottom, we can see this. If we change the header to welcome to Beautify ADUG, we can save this, and you see that it's recompiling it, and we can have a look now, and you'll see it's automatically updated it. It's actually quite quick, this process. As you can see, we'll make another slight change and save this. Oh, well, there it is. All right. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to end our server. So let's pop down here, end that, and we're going to start putting some of our things into this. We're going to add Axios using the node npm. So we go npm I for install and Axios. This will bring down all the components that are and pieces that Axios will need, as well as Axios itself, and add them to our project. This shouldn't take too long. Again, most of these things should already be in my cache, and but quite often the packages are updated, so sometimes it'll need to reload them or to get the latest. Quite often there are multiple dependencies between packages, and way down the track there may be some of the packages that are being depended upon that have been deprecated or may have security issues, and NPM now warns you about these kind of things. Okay, with a little bit of internet magic, we've skipped a little bit of that because there's no point waiting to watch all this happen. All right, now let's start making our application what we want it to be. We're going to remove the Hello World component. Yes, we're going to move that to the trash. We don't need anything under the assets, so let's remove those. And let us create a new component which we're going to call earthquakes.view. Make sure we spell that right, pretty important. And then we're going to update our main app here. Okay, we're going to use a little bit of internet magic here. We're going to replace the contents of this file with some that I prepared earlier. Okay, now I've included a style section here. We're not using it, but just to demonstrate what it would look like, and that's where you would put your style code in there. So we're going to import earthquakes from our earthquake component. We're now using that as our main component. Our HTML is much simplified. This is a very simple application. We have a V app. Inside of that we've got the V bar, which is our nav bar at the top. Is going to say ADUG Canberra demo, and then we're going to have our container, which is going to fill the height of the page. Inside of that we're going to have the earthquakes component. Now let's have a look at the earthquake component, and with a little bit more internet magic, here we have the code. At the moment we have, within this component, we have a V container. Inside we've got some layout stuff, and we've got a little bit of text, so earthquakes, and we don't really have any script at the moment, except we're just saying export the default. So the default is earthquakes, the name of the file. Let's save these files, and then let's bring up the terminal and let us run the program again. So we go npm run serve. Again, it's going to run through the initial compile. We might skip this for some internet magic. Okay, internet magic done, and you can see that we have a whole bunch of error messages. So let's just cancel that. And the reason for that is that the previous npm installs only brought in the things that were required, and I'm using some pieces of the Beautify that have previously haven't been brought in, so let's bring those in. So we just do the npm and I for install. We're going to have some more internet magic. We're going to have some more internet magic over. Let's try and run the application again. More internet magic. Internet magic over. Let's have a look at what we've got. As you can see, we now have the application running. We have a nav bar at the top, and we've got the single word earthquakes sitting in the middle. Okay, so let's go back, have a look at our application. Let's hide this for now, and let's make some more internet magic updates. Let's do some manual updates first. Let's replace this. We're going to replace this with a title. Now, see these little double curly braces? That means that whatever is in the variable title will be substituted into that code when it is rendered onto the screen. So I'll put two of these for now. I'll put one there, and the other one we'll put in there is going to be called info. Now, let's get some internet magic happening. Let's replace this whole thing with something I did a little earlier. and you can see this is all commented out for now. And we have this data section, which is going to return a title, earthquakes with exclamation mark, features, we're going to use this, it's an array, and we're going to store the details of the earthquake event, and info at the moment is empty. So let's have a look at this running. We'll save that and we'll have a look at our screen, and we can see that we have earthquakes now with the exclamation mark. So now we know we're getting the information from the application on there, but that's not very exciting. So let's put this code into action. This is the mounted is a function that's going to run when after the component's been created and is ready to be mounted into the DOM model. Press Ctrl D. What it's going to use Axios. It's going to get the information. I'll just put Ctrl B, which will hide that on the left so we can see a bit more on the screen. So this is our link. This is where we're going to get our JSON data from. What will happen is it will do a get. Now, because JavaScript isn't multi-threaded, you tend to use a lot of promises, so that if you set off a function that's going to take some time, you don't want to block the main JavaScript thread. So the way around it is you run the function, it returns a promise when it's finished, and it will then process that return as soon as possible. So this is the way this is implemented here, is the get function runs. Once it returns data, it will then run this. It's like a generic function. It gives a response, is the data that's come back from the website, and we're just going to assign that to this.info, which refers to this. Within Vue, you refer to everything outside of the enclosure you're in using the this command. So if I was to, as I talk to this property or this element, I would refer to it as this.info. If I had a function or method, as they're called here, you would say this.myMethod to execute it. So now we'll have something in info, and it should populate this tag on our application. Let's see how that goes. Let's have a look at the application. One error, Axios is not defined. Well, I knew about that because this program, or this source, does not know about Axios. So we have to tell it it needs to use it. So we say import Axios from Axios. And then we can save that, have a look, and voila, we have data. As you can see, we've got data, and in there we've got type, feature, collection, metadata, when it was generated. This is Unix style time, so seconds or milliseconds since some date in the past. Some further information, and we can have a look here, and we can sort of see what we're going to get. Type, feature, connection, metadata. So did we get that? Type, feature, collection, metadata. Alright, now we need to do some formatting on this. Now we're going to have some more internet magic, and I'm going to replace this mounted method with one I did it earlier. Starts off pretty much the same. We're doing the get, we're getting the call to the same REST endpoint. We receive the response. We're going to set info to be the response, and we're going to set the title. Is now going to be the response.data.metadata.title. We're then going to go through each of the features. So we're using this for each, and we're going to push a new Java object, I should say JavaScript object, into the array. There are other ways of doing this, but I felt this was a little bit more in the Delphi way of doing things and easier for everybody to understand. Basically, we're creating an object with an ID, and the ID is going to come from the feature properties ID. The title is from the properties title, and the magnitude ditto. With the time, I'm running a JavaScript method to convert it over into an ISO string. I've added an extra property to say that it's going to be visible. There's also this extra code on the end, which is basically saying if there's been any errors in this promise, maybe the web server's not available, then it's going to basically grab the error and we're just going to log that error. In a real application, you'd probably want to have a little bit better error handling than that, but you know, this is just a demo. So let's save this and have a look what we get. Pretty much the same, because we didn't put in the HTML that we need to display it. So this calls for some more internet magic. So let's insert in here, and we can press our Control D to make everything look pretty. And what we're having here is, we'll just ignore this bit for now. We're going to put something in there later. We've got a vlist. Again, it's a Beautify list. It's telling it's got a subheader. I'm going to take 3 lines, and these are instructions as to how it's going to be displayed on different device sizes. So if you've had any experience with Bootstrap divides up the area into 12 columns, and this Beautify uses that concept. So on an extra small device such as a phone, it's going to take up 9 columns. On a small device such as a tablet, it'll take 6. On a medium-sized device like a laptop or a small screen, it'll take 4. And on a large screen, it will take 3/12 of the width available. We have a div, and this is using the v-for statement. So we've got v for feature in features. So for each feature that we have in our features array, it's going to generate this code. So it's going to be a list item, but only if the feature is visible, which they all are at the moment. We've got vlist item content. We're going to have a title, which is going to be an anchor link to the feature URL in a new window. And if we move over here, we're going to have the feature title. The subtitle, we're going to have a magnitude and text obviously, and then the details, and on a new line the time of that feature. So now we've got those pieces in, let's have a look what we get. So now you see we have our title, which has come in from the REST JSON. We have a list of features from the last 24 hours, the magnitude, their time. If we click on one, it will open a new page, which is back onto the USGS site, and you can sort of start playing around with that as you wish. Okay, now we're going to put in some selection of which events or which features we wish to display. So what we're going to do is we're going to put in here, we're going to insert a input field, and this is a Beautify wrapper around a standard input, HTML input field. It has a V model of filter. So whenever a change is made to this, then the appropriate variable called filter will be updated with the results, with whatever has been input into that input field. We're going to have a label on it which says filter, and as people key in or as data is changed, it will call a method called filter results, and it's clearable, so we'll have a little X on there. So what we need now is we need to add the filter results method, and we do that back into in here. We add another property to our JSON object, and which is the methods property. In there is a list of methods that we wish to use. So the one that we're using is filter results, and the way this works is it's going to run through each of our features, and if the filter is null, which is where there's nothing entered into that input field, all the features will be visible. Otherwise, we copy the title into a variable. Because it's not technically a string within the feature, this will convert it into a string, which means that we can use a toLowerCase method upon it. And so we have a logical expression here that we're saying the feature is going to be visible if the title to lowercase includes the filter value to lowercase. Okay, let's see how that goes. Now we see we have the input line. It has text, which is a filter, and notice how the filter sort of pops up there, and we can start keying things in, and as we key in, it automatically filters our list and just shows those where the title matches that filter. It's brought up a little X, and we can just clear the filter straight away, and that's all pretty good. Using Beautify makes the application reactive, and that means that when we display the application on different size screens, whether it's on a phone or a tablet, then the layout will change to meet that new screen size. We can simulate that within Chrome using the developer tools. Now if we press F12, we will get the developer tools window, which has popped up on my other screen, and in here we've got a little picture where we can toggle the device. So we click on that, it will show me the different devices. Now this isn't perfect emulation. Obviously there's so many different variations of operating systems and device sizes, and sometimes it's a bit quirky. For example, you can see that the nav bar doesn't go all the way across. If I hit the refresh, it may or may not fix it. You saw it did, and then it didn't. But it's a reasonable start in terms of developing your application for multiple devices. We can say pick an iPhone X, and that's pretty much the same size, so that wasn't very exciting, was it? Let's try a different iPhone, and you can see it's now worked across. If we look at an iPad, this is how it's going to appear. You may, well, you would have to mess around with the CSS to make sure that you get the word wrapping correct on these things. But you can see that the filter's now changed. It's across the top. It's a different height. I can change it sideways, and it still works pretty much the same. So there you go. iPad Pro, pretty much the same, just bigger, that's all. Of course, this works as you change the size of your browser page. This is probably a good way that you can see how, as it's gone through those different sizes, the filter line is changing size as it goes along. So that's as it's run through these different size points that we have. Okay, and then finally, once you've got your application up and running, what you'll want to do is you'll want to deploy it. So when you deploy it, you'll need to have it on a website or on a server somewhere. You can have it on IIS under Windows, or Apache, or on the cloud, as everybody does these days. One of the sites that I've used is Netlify, and for a straight application which doesn't require any back-end databases or anything, it's basically free hosting, and that's very good value for money. Alright, so to prepare your application for deployment, we use the npm run build command. I'll put a little space in there, it makes it go better. Now this may take it a minute or so, I'll wave the magic internet wand. Okay, as you can see, the build has completed. The size of the files is quite reasonable. When they're gzipped, they're going to be quite small and get out to the browser relatively fast. Let's just have a look at what it's built for us. So we'll go here, and we say that there's now a dist or distribution directory, and within that, let's just close these down. Within that distribution directory, there is a CSS directory, a JS directory, an index, and the fave icon, which has come from our public directory. If we have a look at the index, you'll see that it's all been mimified for us. So Vue used to use Webpack. I don't believe it does that anymore. I think it does it itself. So that saves a few headaches. And yeah, so you would basically take this sub-distribution directory and load it onto your server, wherever it is that you're going to be serving from, and you're in business. As promised, I've put all the code from this complete with the links. If you have a look at the README file, it's got all the links relative to this presentation in there, and contact me via the ADUG mail list if you like, if you've got any questions. I hope this has been helpful and useful, informative, and see you out there. All the best.